Aloha. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Hawaii EV monthly talk story. My name is Noel Marin, board member for Hawaii EV and also Big Island EV. We have a number of leaders here in this call today and members of our various clubs. As I mentioned earlier, Lauren, Doug, Nanette, Peter's with our organization as well. Rob Weltman with Maui EV, newly formed organization. So I'm sure I'll miss some folks here, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we have quite a few leaders here as well. This month's topic is EVs as a service, and this will become more clear as we go through this conversation, or the couple of discussions and presentations we have today. For those of you who are not familiar with Hawaii EV, we are an all-volunteer, nonprofit coalition focused on accelerating our transition to sustainable transportation here in Hawaii. Our efforts are made possible through the contributions of a number of EV clubs across Hawaii. Tesla Hawaii Club, we have membership across the state. Big Island EV, we've been advocating for EVs on Hawaii Island since 2011. Kauai EV, supporting our EV owners in Kauai, and then newly formed just the other month, Maui EV, and we'll soon see a formal logo. It's being finalized. To all our club leaders and also our longtime members and new members, thank you very much for helping us with our mission. The other thing I want to highlight real quick is that we are partnering with, or have been partnering with, a number of organizations locally as well as nationally, all dedicated to accelerating our transition away from fossil fuels to zero emission transportation. And I should also add that we are a chapter of the Electric Auto Association. This is a national group that's been advocating for electric vehicles since the late 1960s. I'd like to again thank our partners for enabling making our mission possible. This is our program for today. We're going to be spending most of the time on discussing a service model, transportation as a service. This is a strategy that involves a shift in how we think about vehicle ownership. And just as many of us now rely on the cloud for data storage, for music, there is an opportunity for us to have convenient and affordable transportation without actually having to own the vehicle. And we'll take a look at this from the standpoint of the private sector as well as the municipal or the state government level. And before we start, I'd like to share a few updates with you. This is what we typically do every session. And that is to take a look at how we're doing on the clean transportation front here in the state. So here are the adoption stats that, just tracking over the past 5 years. And we're seeing some decent progress in the adoption of EVs. This is accelerating, and this is due to a number of things, right? We're seeing that we're having more EVs, EV models available. We're seeing the price dropping. We're seeing longer driving ranges. We're seeing new models, including trucks, that are soon going to be introduced. And as these things start to become more prevalent, we're going to see more and more individuals realizing that there are all these different advantages to driving electric. And many of our EV owners already know that, and we're trying to get others, in our community to also adopt. Importantly, Hawaii is second in the nation after California in terms of EVs per capita. That said, EVs are still less than 2% of the passenger vehicles in our state. We have close to 1 million gas cars on our roads, and we burn 30 million gallons of gasoline each month. So we're making progress, but there's quite a bit that we need to do to accelerate our transition. As you look at it from a county perspective, these are the figures. We're seeing, not unexpectedly, Oahu with the lion's share, close to 12,000 cars, EVs. Maui comes in second, Hawaii Island, Kauai with 452. But what's interesting is just the growth in adoption. So just taking a look at the counts comparing last year to this year, we're seeing a good increase in the adoption of electric cars. And again, this can only improve as all these other factors like price and availability and all these things start to come into play. I hope that we all agree that moving to zero emission transportation is really critical for us achieving a more sustainable world. And it's really really special here in Hawaii, given that we're so energy dependent, right? Everything gets shipped in, and we have many opportunities to not only generate our energy, but also power our energy hubs, right? Our transportation systems, for example. So, we have the opportunity to reduce emissions, to clean our air, and to reduce environmental and economic costs associated with transportation. Electrification of transportation isn't the only thing that we must do. There's so many different things. And when we talk about getting people behind the wheel, we typically talk about it from the standpoint of ownership. But there's another important strategy that we need to take into account. And it talks about reducing the number of vehicles that are required for transportation. And we can achieve this through a number of things, right? Like increasing the utilization of mass transit, making it more attractive, accessible, and end-to-end feasible for transportation, encouraging pedestrian and bicycle traffic. You'll hear this term called multimodal transportation, especially in Oahu, where you want people to be able to get around without necessarily having to get in a car. And then there's this thing called shared mobility. You see a number of the themes around this, and what we're talking about today will also kind of focus around this particular strategy. So these and many other things are things that can be done to reduce our need for transportation, and our ability to do that will have this benefit of reducing our carbon footprint as well. So let's now learn about how we're accelerating our transition to zero emission transportation through transportation as a service. And I'd like to now take a moment to introduce our speakers for today. The first speaker is Andy Huang. Andy is a business development manager at Envoy Hawaii. It's a new ride-sharing service. This company's been on the US mainland for about 4 years and have been partnering with many, many different properties to enable this solution. They're in the process of bringing the service to our state, and Andy will discuss how this concept of mobility as an amenity can be a solution for a number of scenarios, including the scenarios with condos. Andy has a BBA degree from UH Manoa and has worked in the hospitality and service industry since 1998. Before joining Envoy, he was in charge of Advantage Rent-A-Car, where he managed the operations for the entire state. So he's very familiar with the different nuances across the different islands. He's based in Oahu, and Andy, welcome. The second speaker is Benson Medina. Benson is Senior Investment Development Partner for Sustainability Partners here in Hawaii. I think we talked about what's happening in the space that they're facilitating in past meetings, but just to summarize, Sustainability Partners is a capital placement group based in Arizona. This organization invests in government infrastructure projects throughout the U.S. Last year, they were awarded a 10-year statewide contract for the electrification of transportation here in the state. Benson has also geothermal development experience with Innovations Development Group in Honolulu, and he's held executive positions in manufacturing, travel, and marketing in several companies based on the mainland. He's currently VP of Native Hawaiian Chamber of Commerce here on Hawaii Island, and is also a member of the statewide district leadership for Rotary. He lives here in Hilo with his extended family. Benson, welcome. So before I turn this over to Andy, I'd like to just say, just to kick this off, I have a couple of questions here, and I'm sure that our audience will have additional questions. And what I'd like to say is, as you're listening and you're coming up with your questions, just take note of it, put it in the chat, and we'll have a good amount of time to do Q&A after the presentations. So just some framing questions. So the first one is, what are the latest developments in the area of shared mobility that benefit, and what benefits do they offer individuals, businesses, and government? And maybe the next one is more for Andy. We're really fascinated by this concept of amenity as a service, and would like to learn more about how it works. Like, how do you reserve the vehicles? How do you access them? How do you maintain them? how do they get charged? And then maybe the last one is more relevant for Benson. And this whole concept around infrastructure as a service, this is new for many people. Maybe you can help us understand how this strategy works and how government and taxpayers are benefiting as we implement this 10-year strategy for the electrification of transportation here in the state. And with that, I'm going to I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to Andy.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for Noel to invite me for this meeting, and pleasure to be able to share what we are doing with Envoy Mobility as Amenity. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so Envoy is the leading provider of on-demand shared electric vehicle. Envoy vehicles are located dedicated parking spaces like housing complex, condos, workplace, communities. We provide a turnkey solution that includes EV infrastructure, all electric vehicle fleet maintenance, insurance, full service mobile app, customer support, and then robust analytics. So, how this works is we have a proprietary software on the mobile app. So user will download the mobile app, and then they go through the qualification. Only our service is exclusive for the residents only, and so the residents will have to provide some kind of proof, driver license, and one of the utility bills to prove that they're residents, and then they'll get an access code. And then once they have the access code, they can reserve the vehicle on demand. We charge by the hours or by the minutes. So as you know that we call this as amenity, just like a pool, swimming pool, or like the gym. So they utilize this as one of the services that they can use to promote traveling, grocery shopping. We provide insurance, data, roadside service, car wash, maintenance, and also help the properties to install the electric chargers. So, as the properties in the rental property sector, to attract the residents to acquire by offering this amenity, and then we also have the tracking system to track the return on investment. It's a low-cost amenity.
So all of this barbed wire is just to keep people out? Yes. And there's a
Sorry, I'm hearing feedback. Okay. So it's a good low cost for instead of owning vehicles, and if we have apartment condos that has only one parking stall, and you have multifamily living in that household, instead of owning two vehicles and renting a parking space, then you can utilize our service as the alternative. So that way we can lower the number of vehicles on the ground, and also we give the residents an opportunity to try the electric vehicles. Not everybody is very comfortable with driving the electric vehicles, and not everybody have access to one. And if they want to do test drive, that they go to the dealership, make appointment, and do all that. So if there is one on site for them to access easily, then they can start by trying it out. And then we also provide on-site marketing and education to the property residents. So that way, they can try. If they like it, they might end up changing their entire fleet to electric vehicles. So we can help promote lower emission and also the ridership of education of the electric vehicles. So compared to other mobility at other amenities at the apartment, the cap cost for building a swimming pool is very expensive, and also the gym and then the maintenance fee are also very expensive. For having this vehicle as amenity, the cost is anywhere average about 2,500, and then also the monthly cost will be minimum. So compared to the other rideshare programs, for example, like the Uber, the Lyft, they are reliable, convenient, but they're not necessarily affordable. Especially now, the prices are rising. And then there are also other rideshare platforms that are located outside of the property. So that's although they're reliable, affordable, but they're not necessarily convenient. But Envoy has a solution of all three, since you have the vehicle right at your doorstep. So our model is we will charge the property the amenity fee to maintain, because all the insurance and maintenance and cleaning, all that, and then also the marketing strategy. And then the residents will pay as they reserve the ride of vehicles by the minute. At the end of the month, we will calculate how much revenue, and we'll share some of the revenue to the property so that to lower the amenity costs. So it's beneficial for both properties and the resident. With the electric vehicle, another benefit is the resident doesn't have to worry about going to gas the car. And then the app also has the tracking to see how much electricity you still have in the vehicle, so you can select the one that has the most electric, so you don't have to worry about running out of the power on the way going to work or going shopping. Not only we're partnering with apartment condos and workplace community, but we're also getting involved in the community on the mainland. So, for example, we partner with the cruise project at Hood River Farmers Market, and we actually put several vehicles in the community areas, so that way it's beneficial for the affordable housing residents throughout the city. And then we'll also partner with Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator to also provide electric vehicles, and they actually build this solar charger with the battery pack, and that it becomes a off the grid charging station. It promotes like 100% renewable energy to that community. So this next slide I'm sharing is it's provided by American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, and this is like a scorecard for all the states on electrification in the transportation sector. So as you can see, Hawaii ranked number 11 out of 50 states, which is not bad, but the two lowest score section are the transportation system efficiency and equity. Basically are two, it's lack of the policy to encourage shared EV fleet, and also lack of EV program for low income economical distressed environment. So with our service, we can help achieve achieve that goal and increase our scorecard. So as the questions that we have, the second question about how infrastructure, what is the amenity as a service and how does it work is, as I mentioned earlier, that we offer all-inclusive platform for the residents to access our vehicle on demand, and we can help educate the community to the electric vehicles, and then once they get more comfortable, and we hope that we can increase the usage of electric vehicles.
Andy, thanks very much for that. We will pause for questions after Benson has also presented. I just want to acknowledge, what you just shared. I think it's really fascinating. I think it might allow us to enable what we talked about, right? There's certain situations like condos where they may just not have the capacity, space, et cetera, for a whole bunch of people with the EVs, but something like this might be interesting. So. And I also think the first thing that came to mind is the hotel industry, right? support for their tour for their guests. But let's defer the questions to after we've had a chance to chat with Benson. So Benson, we'll turn this over to you. Looking forward to hearing the progress that we're making in the state, and also just in general, infrastructure as a service is a business strategy.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Noel. Appreciate your allowing me to be here today. I wanted to basically talk about overall, infrastructure as a service. And as Noel said, I work with a company called Sustainability Partners, and we actually are capital providers who provide funds to municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals. That's kind of our market. Well, that is our market. And the concept is really about investing in infrastructure so that it supports all the stuff that the government wants to do and to provide for its citizens. So let me walk you through this really quickly. So as a lot of you know, and who have longtime residents of Hawaii, our infrastructure here is old. And when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about our utilities, our bridges, our roads, water systems. They're old. A lot of it was put in there over 100 years ago. Even in Honolulu, the Board of Water Supply, they have pipes in there that are 100 years old. And so when this infrastructure was put in decades ago, they didn't put any plans forward to replace any of this infrastructure when it was going to be at the end of its useful service life 50, 60, 70 years down the road. So we have this huge problem in, how do we replace that? Now, Hawaii as an infrastructure, we have engineers that go and grade states, and ours comes up with a solid D+. And when you look at all of the infrastructure items we're talking about, aviation, bridges, energy, roads, this is kind of where we are. And in our state, it's about $100 billion problem to solve these infrastructure issues. And those of you who drive around the island in Oahu, you know right where that is, where the road's falling apart out there by Hauula. Now, deferred maintenance. So deferred maintenance is basically maintenance that you're supposed to do, but you defer it to later because you basically don't have the resources to do it. And when we go and visit different state agencies, one state agency told us they had $500 million, $500 million, $500 million worth of deferred maintenance that they haven't done simply because they don't have the money to do it. So even federal assistance isn't enough. When our big infrastructure bill going through Congress gets passed, probably what's going to trickle down to Hawaii is maybe $7, $8, $9 billion, which is great, and it's gonna address some problems. But if our infrastructure problem is 100 billion and we get 8 or 9, that means we're only going to address about 8 or 9% of what our problems are here. So assistance has to come from other avenues, especially in the private sector. So what Sustainability Partners does basically is that it works with governments as a financing partner, and then we supply the money for whatever that infrastructure is, and then we charge the government entity a user fee. So it's similar to what Andy's doing, right? Where I'm going to talk about our transportation contract, where we would provide cars, we own the cars, we maintain the cars, the state basically uses them, and then we charge them a user fee based on the mileage that they use every month, very similar to what Andy's program is. But in the case of bridges, buildings, water systems, we find a metric. It could be per gallon of water. It could be per person using the facility. We figure out a metric, and then we charge basically a user fee. So that's basically how our system works. Now, the type of infrastructures that we finance, all of the stuff that's on there, obviously, EVs, water systems, facilities, boilers, where there's obvious need to have some of that stuff replaced. So let's just drill down and talk about the EV portion of that. So here's where our strategic partnership comes in, because in the state's thinking, right, their maintenance theory is basically what we call run to fail. They run it until it fails, and then they replace it with something else. So what our program allows them to do, and we were awarded, as Noel said, a contract for electrification of transportation for all the state agencies in every county for the next 10 years. And so, although we're out there, we're moving already with it, it's slow because it's a new concept, and it's slow for people to understand how it truly works. One of the major advantages of it, of course, as technology increases, and this is one of our cars. Actually, the first car we put into use went to the state energy office. It's a Tesla Model Y, and the reason, and I'll show it to you in the next slide. They chose Tesla, and a lot of the state workers got heat because they're driving Teslas around, is because long term, since we own the asset, it's actually less expensive to drive a Tesla long term than it is a Nissan Leaf or a Chevy Bolt. Now, there's nothing wrong with those cars, but we, as the owner of the asset, the way that we gauge our user fees is based upon the longevity and the reliability of what that asset is. So this is basically how we kind of calculate it. We look at the vehicle plus the charger, the infrastructure to install that, the maintenance and management of it. And you can see, like, this is a per mile per month charge. That Tesla is actually ahead of it by far. Yeah, and then we put in, we consider customer satisfaction index, all of that. As soon as we delivered these 45 Teslas to the Department of Transportation, Ed Sniffen, who's the deputy director in charge of transportation, he got hauled before the legislature because they wanted to know why are state workers driving Teslas around. And as soon as he put this graphic up and explained it, end of story, right? Didn't have to worry about that anymore. So right now in our program, we're in the state energy office as one of our cars, state Department of Transportation Highways Division. We already got cars going into the Airports Division, UH Public Safety, Department of Land and Natural Resources, Maui County Public Works. These are just some of the agencies that are starting to look at basically transforming their fleets from regular internal combustion engine cars into electric vehicles. Now, the government, of course, the legislature helped us out this year with the governor signing bill, House Bill 552, which dictated that all state fleets were going to be completely electric by 2035. Now, that sounds like a long ways away, but in some cases, they're still buying internal combustion engines. So it'll take a while to cycle those guys through. But the good news about that bill is that after January 2022 coming up, can no longer buy internal combustion engine vehicle, right? And so, but here's going to be the game changer, right? We talked about pickup trucks. So in the state, between the state and all the counties, they own probably a little over 8,000 vehicles. Now, over half of those vehicles are light pickup trucks and SUVs. So when Ford begins to deliver en masse the F-150, the electric version of it, and I know a lot of you probably ordered one already or really familiar with it, but that's going to be the game changer for us. And we expect probably over the next year that we're going to deliver hundreds of these vehicles into our state. Now, the big game changer, of course, for those of you guys who follow cars, right? You know that the F-150 is the largest selling vehicle in the history of vehicles, right? So when you get an electric version of something that's the biggest selling vehicle anywhere, and it's actually better than the internal combustion engine version of it, then basically people are going to say, wow, we got to start going electric. Now, the issue, as you know, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, it's not really the vehicles, it's the infrastructure, right? It's the charging infrastructure, the installation and the maintenance of the charging infrastructure. Because some of you guys that have EVs, and if you don't have a charger at your house, you know that a lot of times you drive up to, you look on your app and you drive up there and that charger isn't working. And so in Sustainability Partners model, that would never happen simply because if we put the charger in, we own it and we're in charge of maintaining it. So it has to work for us to get paid. Now, obviously, we got mass transit applications of it. We're working on a $70 million project with the County of Hawaii to provide 40 new electric buses to them. And we're hoping actually to have that system operational in 2022, in the latter part of 2022. So that's kind of ambitious. Now, we made a presentation to the rail people, but as you know, that's kind of a crazy project going there. But we could help them if they needed to have that help. So far, nothing back from them. Now, what we know is that as soon as we put a transit level project in anywhere, Hawaii County is probably going to be the first one, then that's going to start a chain reaction that's going to put it basically in every county in the islands. Now, I was talking about installing and maintaining the EV infrastructure. Now, that really is the issue for us because what we see across our state, now, although Hawaiian Electric is trying to step up, their Make Ready program, but there just is not enough charging infrastructure across the state to do it. And when we calculated the cost of really getting a working infrastructure just on the transit level, it's $1 billion to put that in across the state. And now, as you guys know, there's all kinds of different ways, this Panaflex way where you charge the bus overhead. There's inductive charging now where you drive over basically an electric plate that charges the bus while it's sitting there. We're looking at, hydrogen cell buses or hydrogen cell to power the buses. We're looking at capturing methane gas out of our dumps, our landfills, and converting that into electricity. So lots is going to happen as far as installing and maintaining EV infrastructure because the counties and the state is interested not only in their cars and their vehicles, but also to provide widespread infrastructure so that private citizens like yourselves can actually use it. So anyway, our contract is there. It's good to 2030. It's pretty easy for the county people to use it. And so right now, with the support of the State Energy Office, and there's energy offices in every county, we're starting to now go slowly through every single department, taking a look at the cars that they have. They're targeting typically the cars that are over 10 years old that will need to be replaced, and we're starting to replace them with electric vehicles. So as that goes on, then we're going to see some major advancements in what's going to be happening as far as electric vehicles and how we're going to participate in that. So that's my presentation, and maybe it's time to open it up with some questions. I'd be glad to take any if you'd like that one. So,
Benson, that was amazing. I had not realized, as a result of your presentation, I just realized that I know so little about what Sustainability Partners is bringing to the state and to our society here. So thanks very much for that. I'm really excited about the progress and the plans that have been raised. I think I'd like to open this now to everybody. I hope we have some questions for both Benson and Andy. I noticed that there were some that are being addressed.
Yeah, I wanted to address Peter's question that he put in the chat, like what is the ESCO? Because I had that on there. So an ESCO is an energy saving company. So if you're old like me and you remember back in the 70s when they had that around the oil embargo and all of that, we had these long gas lines that were like 3 miles long. So what energy saving companies were designed to do was to come in and figure out ways in which it could save energy for a particular company, right? So they started out, like the low hanging fruit is light bulbs, right? So they would come into a company and say, look, if we replace all of these your T1 light bulbs with LED lights, you could save $10,000 a year on your electric bill. So the ESCO would come in and they said, look, we'll pay for all of that, and you can just repay it by the savings that you're going to have off of your electric bill. Now, so let's say they say $10,000, let's say a month, right? But they still got to pay the ESCO, $7,000 a month because they put up all this money to change all of their light bulbs or whatever. So well, a pretty good concept. But what happened is that then it went on the books, like let's say Hawaii County did it as a debt now. Right, because now they owe them $500,000 because they did this big light job there, and so Sustainability Partners advanced it by coming up with a newer model where it was basically just a user fee that didn't go on the books as a debt. So it was handled more. It was basically a capital expense that got transformed into an operational expense. So it made more sense now for municipalities to participate now because it was easier financially to justify.
So for accounting purposes, it was essentially like a lease or a rental.
Yeah, it was a lease or a rental, except like a lease or like in the case of a lease, right? It would typically be X amount of dollars, right? So the lease payment would be $600 or whatever it would be, right? So in our case, because it's based on use, it would be it would be
it's variable.
Yeah, you like your utility bill, right? More electricity you use, more you pay. So it didn't filter down on their balance sheet. But that's a good question. People always ask that. So thanks for that, Peter.
Thank you.
Hey y'all, I've got a question. I'm actually applying to jobs in that field, electric vehicle repair. I've done that, and also as an electrician, I've installed a lot of electric vehicle chargers, Tesla certified installers, stuff like that. Right? Mainland. Just moved here. Where would I go? Who's hiring that through these projects so I can work on the cool stuff?
Well, what I would tell you is that there are a lot of Aloha Charge, which is part of a nationwide charging infrastructure company. There's EverCharge, which is here. So anybody that's installing chargers, I mean, that's a huge market. They're looking for people who understand charging systems and how to install charging systems. I think if you went to Tesla, Tesla would have a whole list of people that are certified to install their chargers. So and it's going to be a huge market. And one of the things that's happening to us is that when we're going into the government, right, we got all of these guys that are diesel mechanics, right. And so they're all in the union. So part of the pushback that we're getting is like, okay, well, what about our union guys? What are these guys going to do? So, so part of what we're trying to do is the manufacturers come in. You're working on a big bus project with Proterra. They bring guys in, retrain them on how to work with electric vehicles. It's challenging because there's a state law now that says you cannot bring any kind of private enterprise in that's going to reduce or eliminate government jobs. So we always have to have our eye on that kind of like. So
if I wanted to go specifically into the electric vehicle repair side of things, like right now, if you want to get a Tesla repaired, you get to ship it from island to island. If I need to get my electric Ford Ranger repaired, I have to repair it myself. So when I see these F-150s coming here, I'm like, is there a Ford dealership that's going to take care of that on the island? Or are we going to ship it to them? Or should I be making a company right now to intercept those repairs for a specific make and model?
Well, if you're entrepreneurial, man, there's the market's coming. So any type of anybody who is going to service or fix any type of electric vehicle, you're going to have a lot of work for probably the next 100 years. So yeah, if you're an enterprising guy, and they're going to come. I mean, there are companies already getting set up just to service and maintain and fix electric vehicles. So if you already have that technological background, you're in good shape. Yeah, you should have no problem getting a girlfriend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Benson, I do have a question as it relates to, and I think Sharon has a question as well for you in the chat. Where does the capital come from? But my question is around access to the infrastructure. So my assumption, and this is based on how things are working with Hawaii County, is that you can have these charging stations that are available for the fleet, but they will also be available to the general public. So is it directionally, is it safe to assume that this electrification of the state fleet will also naturally result in greater access to reliable charging stations by the public?
Yes. Yeah, the short answer is yes. And part of what I think Hawaii County and every county wants to address is how do we increase our EV charging infrastructure in a way where we don't have to pay for it, right? And so they're very, very interested in that, not only on the EV side, but also in commercial charging. Because right now, you're going to see electric garbage trucks. I mean, they're already there operating on the mainland. Electric garbage trucks. There's going to be long haul tractor trailers. All of these guys are all going to come up with electric versions of it. And right now, there's no commercial charging infrastructure available anywhere. And so that's one of the big quandaries. Every state government or every government in our state is trying to figure out, like, okay, how do we get set for that, and then how do we add into our basically our residential, the people that are driving EVs, because one of the things, as you guys know, as EV operators, your personal cars, our infrastructure kind of sucks right now, and so we need a big boost in really being able to upgrade that, make sure it's all working. And at least for our side, what we're saying for sustainability partners, if we put it in, it's got to be working. So we're gonna maintain that. So yes, your question is a good question, and I think every county that we're talking to, their design is to make more EV charging available for their private citizens.
Excellent.
I have a question, Benson, is like relative to the charging infrastructure you would for, say, county fleet support, that's going to be located at a county facility. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So is it realistic?
Yeah.
Is it realistic to envision that there would be a measurable access to the public where that's not really someplace that they would be going?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I know that the initially all of these chargers that we're putting in, they're all at county sites. But what the county is also looking at, especially at the transit level, is on route charging, right? So like between Kona and Kohala, there would be a mid route charger where the bus could pull in, and at that site they would also add public charging in there too, because we'd have to bring the electrical infrastructure in, and since we're gonna have to set it up as commercial, what they want to do is then make a twin of that that will allow residential people to come in and charge at that same place. So they're definitely looking at it, and so and then part of the other thing too is setting up the source of electricity, right? Because in some places it's not you can't run 600 feet of conduit to get to a charger. So in some of these more rural areas, we're looking at microgrids, putting up microgrids that'll put battery storage where people can plug in. So that, actually, like I said, I don't think the cars are the issues, the vehicles. No, it's the charging infrastructure. That's the challenge right now for us everywhere in the state, is how do we increase and make more reliable our charging infrastructure.
Thanks, Benson.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can we address Sharon's question?
Yeah. Where does the money come from? Yeah, because anytime you come in with a lot of money, they're like, "Hey, man, that's not like drug cartel money, right?" Okay, so we get our money from a lot of places. People that do infrastructure financing, they're linked into what's called global infrastructure funds, and global infrastructure funds come from. Obviously, there's tremendously wealthy individuals that invest in that, but also it's pension funds, retirement funds, that kind of funding, where somebody who invests in infrastructure, they're not looking for a quick, I want to double my money type of investment. So what they're looking for is a smaller, maybe just 3 or 4%, but over a long period of time. And typically, like retirement funds, they want a safe investment over a long period of time. So that's why our market is only municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals, entities that typically have longevity, right? And so the kind of ideal infrastructure fund investor is looking for a 50-year project, where they're going to put in, $3-4 billion over 50 years. So they want a safe long-term thing, investment. So that's basically where the funds can come from, and it is it's mind-boggling because I'm not a financial person, right? But when I go out there and I hear our CEO, and I always cringe when he says that, is I've been in meetings with him where he says, "Well, how much capital do we need for a project?" Because we could do easily in the low billions. I was like, "Ooh, man, really?" But they're there, and there are people looking for investments just like the kinds that we're talking about right now that would slap it down in a second if they have the right customer, right? It's actually the right customer, and as long as the government is the customer, we're okay.
Thank you. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions for Andy? I know he addressed a number of them in the chat, but anything else that we want to raise?
I do have a question for Benson, though. I was wondering if there's any possibility we can partner up, since you're doing EV charging and we can provide the service of the vehicles, and to benefit the community, not just the apartment condos or buildings, but in certain community that has less access with, transportation.
Yeah, there's always a part of what sustainability partners is the partners part, because for us, we're just a capital company, so we don't actually. We do know something about EVs and charging, but we depend on guys like you, Andy, that have that expertise, that can tell us, and guys like Noel who can say, hey, we need more help, in our private infrastructure. So we're always open to talking to people about technologies, ways in which we can partner with people. And I got to tell you, who actually launched us into the whole game was Ulupono. They're the guys that launched us into the Hawaii market. They attended a mobility conference a couple of years ago in Colorado. We were lucky to be one of the financing people to get invited to it. There, we were able to connect with a lot of state people, energy people came, transportation people came, and then we forged those relationships and then figured out a way to make this thing work. So our environmental lobby gang in the state of Hawaii, it's unbelievably powerful group. And so, these partnerships that they're putting together, Blue Planet, all these guys, Hawaii EV Owners Association. I mean, very powerful group. So yeah, Andy, the answer is yes. So let's connect afterwards and
Yes.
talk about how we can make this work.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Noel. Firstly, let me just say I'm Ron Riley from the Big Island Volcano Village, and I work with Noel on a number of projects, including Citizens Climate Lobby, which is lobbying for national carbon pollution pricing. And the key feature of that is the innovation component. If we make fossil fuels more expensive, people will look for more affordable options. And I'm just really encouraged with Andy and Benson. This is just exciting stuff. You mentioned 552. Many of us were out there lobbying and sending in testimony for that. So that was
Thank you.
That was great. A bottom line question actually comes from the Big Island, and that's the Mauna Loa Observatory up here at about 10,000 feet. And they're measuring 414 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that's flowing by up there. And one of the statistics that I'm concerned about is the fact that Hawaii is producing, at the most recent figures from the Department of Health, 22 million tons of CO2 equivalent every year. Okay, and this has been fairly stable for about the last 5 or more years. And the thing that needles me is that their most recent statistic is 2017. And I'm going, shoot, what about 2018? What about 2019? Heck, what about 2020? How are we doing on getting ourselves electrified, ground transportation? And how are we doing getting our energy sector electrified? And I mean renewable. And we know it varies by island, but it seems to me that that's a key figure that everybody ought to be watching on a monthly, certainly a yearly basis. And we're like, how many years behind? 4 years behind. And the Department of Health has told me that their way of gathering all that data is so intricate and complicated and difficult, and it takes time and that they're just behind. And this may be a staffing funding issue. But I'm wondering if anybody knows of a simpler metric that we could use to get an estimate that would match the exact figures and give us up-to-date information, because to me that would be very helpful for legislative action.
I think if you go to you go about it indirectly, right? We know precisely how much fossil fuel we import, that we bring into the state. So even if you just look at the sources of emissions that we actually are actively engaging in, that could be a surrogate, right? That could be something that we can translate into emissions, and that we track, right? That's a monthly stat from DBET. But just going back to your question, right? Just that I think it relates to Benson, what we do, right? And maybe Andy, what we do as well, is as we implement these things, we introduce instrumentation that allows for real-time feedback, right? Maybe the county is able to understand, because of what we're doing now, we're actually actively reducing emissions by X. Or when a consumer is actually plugging in, they have some feedback right through the app that they're utilizing that gives them some positive reinforcement that they're actually making a difference. I think that when we think about it from the standpoint of how do you create data that incentivizes action, that incentivizes the right decisions, and build that into the project, I think that will serve this thing that you're indirectly sharing, Ron, which is how do we use data to incentivize more of the right behavior and to make it happen sooner.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to that, Noel. So as we're sort of moving through the state here in every single county, and what we're beginning to understand is that people want things to change, right? And so what we have noticed is that there's there's really three elements, and this is no new news, and probably all you guys already know this, is that what we see on our side is the ability of the leadership to act, right? And I think that one of the reasons that we're making some progress here on the Big Island is that we have a mayor that actually wants to do something. And when the mayors got together in 2017 and said, hey, we're going to green our counties, when he took over, he said, hey, man, this thing is going to work. I mean, we're actually going to do this. And so he's the kind of guy who calls me up, at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday and said, hey, where's my electric buses? Because, we need to get emissions down. So active leadership is one thing. The second thing is that you need to have investment. That people are going to put money into these projects that are going to make them go, whether they come from the private sector, public sector, wherever they come from. Like for us, we see that as that's our part, right? To invest the money it's going to take to make these projects go. And then the third thing, which is really important, probably right along what Ron is talking about, is the whole resiliency part, which is basically being able to track all of this stuff, being able to upgrade technology as technology needs to be upgraded, and then helping to filter that information down just to our average citizen, because that's where things really start to move. So and then never discounting the power of a group like yours, because I watched the Hawaii Wildlife Fund derail or basically win a Supreme Court hearing now, or a Supreme Court case that actually put our state, Maui County, it was Hawaii Wildlife Fund versus Maui County, about the water. They were basically taking their treated sewage water, right, and putting it into what's called injection wells, which are just basically lava tubes. And it was Hawaii Wildlife Fund who went out there and with all of their volunteers and started taking water samples and sending these bacteria counts that were off the chart to the DOH that actually got this whole thing going. So there's stuff that we could do at an organic level that could help influence that, because I think people are starting to listen more now to groups like this who advocate for that kind of change.
Thanks, Benson. So team, this has been an incredible session. I really appreciate our time together. Benson, Andy, thanks very much for joining. Let me just share my screen real quick to just wrap us up here. Okay, so our next meeting is August 28th. We're still trying to figure out what we're going to do then. This is our contacts for today, right? So all the links, and maybe what I'll do is, let me just get off share here, and then I'll just put this in the chat so you'll have access to it. Yeah, so the links I put in the chat. So thanks very much for participating. We will publish our the recording of this session so that others can share and learn. And thank you. Thanks very much. Have a great weekend.
Okay. Thanks for having me, Noel. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.